The stakes just keep getting higher, folks. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Week 12 betting lines with conference championships and college football playoff appearances on the line. We got Steve Merrill on the line as well from ProSportsInfo.com. I encourage you to head over there, ProSportsInfo.com, for your betting needs in the NFL, college football, the NBA as well. Steve, how you doing today?
Hey, Mark, doing well.
All right, let's jump into it. There are three obvious matchups that have the most in regards to playoff implications from three different conferences. We'll start in the Big 12 with Oklahoma and Baylor. There's one team that's undefeated in the Big 12. There's a team that's at home in this matchup in the Big 12, so you wouldn't think that they would be the 10-point underdog, but knowing the brand names of the two schools and the metrics and how they play out, Baylor, I don't want to call them lucky, Steve, but a very, very fortunate football team a number of times this year.
Yeah, they actually still have about a 5% chance of making the 14 playoff, which is hard to believe because, you don't feel like they deserve to be in this mix, but they are 9-0 straight up. They're highly ranked. And obviously, if they win this game as a 10-point dog, they are definitely in the mix as they have Texas and then Kansas to finish up in the Big 12 title game. I don't think they're going to win this game, though, but I do think the point spread is a bit inflated. In fact, my power rankings favor Oklahoma by 9 on the road. So might only be a point difference, but 10 is obviously a very key number. In fact, about 4 to 5% of the time, a team is going to win by exactly 10 points as a favorite. So I do think that extra point here gives us some value with Baylor. And it's hard to trust Oklahoma. I mean, we saw them lay that egg a few weeks ago as a 23.5-point favorite against Kansas State. They barely beat Iowa State after that 42-41 as a 14-point favorite. In fact, if you go back over the last couple months now, Oklahoma's on a 1-4 point spread run despite going 4-1 straight up in those games. So I think, once again, I could see a situation here where Baylor loses but covers the 10-point inflated spread.
Oklahoma with a 10-point advantage on Kansas State let it slip away and was completely dominated 41-6 during one stretch of that game. They led big against Iowa State and were outplayed and outscored 20-0 in the fourth quarter. And certainly Iowa State could have chosen to take that game to overtime. Oklahoma, 10-point favorite on the road at Baylor in what has become now the Big 12 game of the year in the regular season. Heading to the SEC, obviously LSU took care of business against Alabama. Georgia owns the East, but has to continue to win with a loss on its schedule against South Carolina. Traveling to Auburn out of the playoff mix, but at the same time, when we look at playoff aspirations, Georgia still with one loss, goes to Auburn, the Tiger point favorite.
Yeah, surprisingly, Auburn actually has about a 5% chance mathematically of still being in the playoffs. You would think with two losses, though, they're all obviously on the outside looking in, but in the SEC, such a strong conference, crazy things could happen. And I think if they can win this game, they maybe get back in the mix, especially finishing up with Alabama at home on November 30th. And as we saw last week, Alabama is beatable this season. My power rankings make this game a pick'em. So I do think the line is inflated here. And now it's gone from 2.5 to that key number, as you said, of 3. Georgia's a solid 3-point favorite right now. +3 or more, I think there is line value with Auburn in this game. And I'm not sold on Georgia this year. This is a team that lost outright as a 3-touchdown favorite against South Carolina a few weeks ago. They bounced back against Kentucky and Missouri as big favorites. I actually had a best bet on Georgia last week, -18 for my clients against Missouri. So that 27-0 win, I don't read too much into that. But then you look at that Florida game, a 7-point win could have gone either way there. So I think Georgia's beatable. I think Auburn's flying a little bit under the radar now with the 2 losses. And what I like is the fact that they did bounce back with the win against Ole Miss. They didn't cover. They were a 17-point favorite. They only scored 20 in that game. That was a terrible spot for them. The fact they had the bye week after that, I think, is huge. I think they do regroup here, and I think there is a little bit of line value +3 or more with the underdog Tigers.
And moving to the Big Ten, what a great story at Minnesota, where the Golden Gophers matched up against Penn State last week, got the win against the top 4 team at home in their truly big test of the season. But it's the first of many going on the road, taking on a 3-loss team against Iowa. On the surface, for people that aren't into the betting world, this would seem ridiculous. A 9-0 Minnesota team that just beat the number 4 team in the country. They're an underdog on the road against Iowa, but it certainly, in regards to, similar to the Baylor situation, makes sense in regards to the metrics, Steve.
Yeah, and if you look at strength of schedule, Iowa's played about nearly a 10-point stronger schedule this year as well. So they might be 6-3, and as you said, Minnesota might be 9-0, but schedule strength favors Iowa. My power rankings favor them as well, but only by 1.5 points. So I do have Minnesota as the better overall team in this game, But when you factor in about 3.5 points for home field, depending on the location, it comes out to Iowa about -1.5. So once again, like the other two games, I do think this line is inflated. So in all three situations here, I think you are paying a premium if you like the favorite this week. I do think you're getting some value with the underdogs. And what's interesting about all three of these games as well is they're on key numbers. I talked about +10, but these last two games, +3, might only be a 1.5 difference from my power rankings, but 1.5 to 3 is a big difference because about 9 to 10% of the time, football favorites win by exactly 3 points. So +3 or more, I lean towards Minnesota here. Now, obviously, the scheduling setup concerns me. That was a huge spotlight game for them last week. I've always said that the letdowns happen after tough losses than big wins, but that's not always the case. Winning as a home dog and then having to travel now and playing another tough opponent on the road, this does look like a real big potential flat spot for Minnesota. So tread lightly, even though their line is a bit inflated at +3.
Kinnick Stadium, a notoriously difficult place to play for Iowa's home field advantage there, and with the defense that they bring. And then again, for Minnesota, this is just not a big win. This is like a decades type of win that they encountered against Penn State. And then I always look forward to, Steve, your wild card selection as you look across the nation.
Yeah, we talk about key numbers. Once again, I'm going to stick with that theme, and I'm going to look at Southern Miss. It's an early evening game at 6 Eastern on Saturday. They're at UT San Antonio. UT San Antonio this season is 4-5 straight up. They have not beaten a team that has a win this season. So this is a really bad 4-5 team. They've been outscored 19-32 on average this year. They give up almost a yard and a half per play more than their opponents. And last week, I actually went against Southern Miss here with my under-the-radar pick. I used UAB. I didn't use it as a best bet for my clients later in the week, but it was a game I was looking at. UAB lost 37-2. What I like to do, though, is when I look at games and I think teams are in good or bad situations and they either under or outperform, that's always a red flag or a play-on situation for me. And I really thought Southern Miss played better than expected last week with that 37-2 win. So I actually have a buy sign on them right now. And at -16.5, we also get a nice number here early in the week. I'd expect this to be 17 or higher by the weekend. 17, another key number. And once again, UT San Antonio, don't let the 4-5 records fool you. They're one of the worst teams in college football. I think Southern Miss will have no problem beating them by more than 17 if focused. And I see no reason why they won't be. They do have their home finale against Western Kentucky on deck next week. So it's a little bit of a sandwich situation, but I don't think they're going to be able to help but win by 3 touchdowns or more.
Check out the banner, folks, prosportsinfo.com for all your wagering needs, NFL, college football, the NBA, and college basketball starting as well with Steve Merrill. We appreciate it as always, Steve.
Thanks, Mark.